Welcome to The Whole View. I'm Stacy Toth of Real Everything. I'm here each week to dive deeper into how we can find happiness and health inside and out through self love, body positivity, and discovering new ways to be our best selves. Before we get started, a reminder this podcast is for general educational purposes and is not intended to diagnose, advise, or treat any physical or mental illness. And we always recommend that you see a licensed health professional accordingly. Although today we're going in a little bit of a different direction for the show, and I'm excited to welcome Emma. Emma is an expert on human design. And listeners, if you're not familiar, don't worry. We're gonna get you up to speed today. Emma Dunwoody is the human design coach on Instagram and was diagnosed with chronic depression and panic disorder over 20 years ago and became a catalyst for her own self study and ongoing pursuit of direction and purpose in life. Sounds very familiar to a lot of us. I think we kind of go on our own journeys to find our best selves and stumbled upon the human design system over 17 years ago. So now she has a lot of experience as a certified human behavioral specialist and qualified human design coach. And Emma Dunwoody makes human design practical and accessible for everyone, which I am looking forward to because I just before we started, we were talking and I shared my chart with Emma and I was like, I have absolutely no idea what this means. So I'm looking forward to it being accessible and understanding. And if you're interested in getting more of her information, you can find her on Instagram, her website at emmadunwoody.com, where you can get your own chart for free, as well as listening to the Human Design podcast. And listeners, as a side note, we are going to address the elements of this that are and are not scientific. And I just want you to be open to exploring today. We've done a show before on astrology. And so maybe you want to go back and listen to that one as kind of a preface in terms of a mindset on how to approach this, whether you think of it as spirituality, whether you think of it as something to simply be interested in, or whether you just simply want to learn to understand what your friends are talking about, we're here for it today. I personally am excited to kind of expand my understanding of a lot of things. And I hope that a lot of my science minded friends just stick with us. I promise we'll get there. So we are going to dig into all of that. But I wanted to give Emma a chance for you to kind of talk a little bit about yourself and how you came into human design and more about your story. So welcome.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here. And I'm so excited. I love the preface. I love the preface of like, don't worry, people, we're going to get to the science because this is very much my journey. You know, if you told me 20 years ago that my primary focus would be on something like human design, that at that time, I didn't even know what it was. If someone had said it was astrology, I'd be like, nah, that's not my jam. So I'm really excited to be here. I'm really excited to introduce people to this incredible system. So a little bit about me. As you said, I was diagnosed with depression and panic disorder at the age of 28. And I was given a diagnosis that I would never heal from this, but I would learn to manage it. And in that moment, because I was experiencing so much pain, that wasn't an option. My choice, the only two choices that I could see ahead of me was to either heal myself completely or not to continue on with this thing called life. And that was, it's a really confronting situation to be in. And gratefully, I took option A and I was like, okay, well, I have this diagnosis. I feel like it's not true. There was some part of me, deep down that was like, I just feel like that's not true, that I don't have to live with this for the rest of my life. But what am I going to do about it? So it was this catalyst for going on this deep dive, this long journey into how I got myself into that seat, into that diagnosis. I was so sure that if I could work out how I got here, then I could get somewhere else. And the destination at the time was happiness. That was all I could think about. I just wanted to feel happy again. So I started studying the science of happiness. I started studying the brain. And of course, I went down the human behavior rabbit hole. And this just became my obsession, healing my mental health, In this journey, at the same time, the more I learned about myself, the more I learned about the brain, my behavior, my conditioning, my fear, why I would constantly self-sabotage. I realized that the life that I created wasn't my own. And it was a lot of the reason why I felt the way I felt. So over the years, I shifted from the advertising industry. I retrained to become a master coach, which was a 3-year program to really dive super deep into human behavior and be able to coach people to become their most expansive selves, to reach their potential. I healed a marriage. I had 2 kids. I healed my own mental health. I'd done so much and I'd had so much positive change. And then a number of years later, and this is probably about 5 years ago now, I had my business. It's this little organic business that was fantastic and growing. I had made all this change. I was doing what I love. I had these amazing kids. We lived where we wanted to live. But there was still this part inside of me that was like, surely I should feel better than this. I thought once you did all the things, then of course, then you would feel better. I've rewired my entire brain, for goodness sake. Why don't I feel filled up inside? So that became the next mission for me. And I actually went off and I walked 800 kilometers or 500 miles in the metrics, a pilgrimage across Spain, and just put it out there. Hey, universe, I really need to sort this purpose thing out. I need to get clarity around my purpose. Like, what am I here to do? I've done all of this great stuff. I feel 86% there, but the little piece that's missing is having a really big impact on me. So I went away, I did this pilgrimage. And on the way back from Spain, I put it out there. I was like, okay, you need to really hit me over the head, universe. You need to be so obvious with what specifically I need to be focusing on to really feel fulfilled. And when I arrived home, everyone started asking me about this thing, human design. Do you know about human design? But what about human design? And I was like, that is so weird, because I'd picked it up a couple of other times and I'd put it down because as a behavioralist, I didn't like the language. The language was very negative. People then attach it to their identity and then no, it doesn't work. So I had chosen to sort of put it down. But this time I'd made a promise to God, universe, source, whatever you call that if you just show me, then I will do this thing. So I made a promise to myself to run my human design experiment, to just take the knowledge, run the experiment, and see the results that I get. And really quickly, I started to get significant shifts in my life. Even though I'd had massive growth and change and improvement, things started to really shift. I started to feel fulfilled inside. And then I did the scariest thing I think I've ever done on this journey. I took human design to my corporate clients. And at the time, I had this business I was a performance coach. I worked with C-level executives. I ran workshops, and it was very science-based, results-based. I was deep into all the research. Everything had to be proven. It had to be backed up by science. And then I'm starting to use this human design thing. And I was afraid to ask my CEOs, what time were you born? If you tell me what time you were born, I can have a look at this other modality that I've been playing around with. And of course, because we built up such trust and rapport with all of my clients, they were like, yeah, sure, here's my details. And then I started to integrate this human design thing, this system, into what we were already doing to improve their happiness, their performance, their fulfillment, their relationships. And all of a sudden, the results that they were already getting great results, but they just amplified. One of my clients, she wanted to become a CEO in 8 years, and within 3 years, she got her first CEO position. So by the time I was getting results, by the time I could see that this thing, no matter my bias or my opinion of it, I could see that it was getting results, and I'm very results driven. So once I can see that my clients and myself are getting results, then I've fully integrated all of this into my work. So I now actually work with a model that I call transformational human design. It's where I brought all the behavioral coaching, everything that we need to transform our lives and transform the supercomputer between our ears. And I've put it together with human design because human design is our energetic blueprint. So when we understand the energies that lie within us, our superpowers, our challenges, how we're best designed to make decisions, how we can listen to our intuition better, how we can parent our children, how we're, the specific themes that we're here to lean into, and then we apply it to who we want to become, everything just amplifies. So, long answer to your simple question.
No, it's very interesting to hear that it started as science for you and then you were hesitant as well. So I know I want to dive into that, but before we do, maybe you could just give us like the high level overview because I've only tangentially heard of human design. I had my body graph done a couple of years ago and like did nothing with it. It was a gift from someone. And once I realized that it was astrology based, admittedly, I was like, oh, well, this is woo woo. It doesn't matter what it is, so I'm not going to pay attention. And I think just in general in my life, I'm more curious. And I do think that I like the idea of any tool that's out there to use as introspection for ourselves. And I think that there's a lot of science that supports introspection and self work as being really powerful tools to give science based results. So, whether that's, meditation, whether that's astrology, whether that's religion, whether that's human design, whether that's volunteer work, like it can look very different for people how they choose to enact some of that self work. But for me, so listeners, you know where I'm coming from, and Emma, you know where I'm coming from. I am definitely of a resistant mindset, but I am definitely more curious now and open to the idea that I could use this as a tool to learn more about myself. And I would love to hear just kind of the high level on what it really means because it's a complicated thing. If listeners, you go and you Google it right now, or you look on Emma's website and you do your free graph, you're going to get something back that is a little like, what is this? Right. So, what
Yeah.
is it exactly?
So the best way I think we can explain it is, and again, it's from my background, I'm a profiler. So I'm certified in a number of different profiling tools. Things like Enneagram, things like Myers-Briggs or eDisc, and these profiling tools that we're all really super aware of. Okay. Human design is just really similar to that. Now, the difference is that with these profiling tools, they're either personality or behavioral. We have to answer questions. So we have to do it via our mind. We have to do it via our perception of who we are, our identity. Now, depending on whether you jump online and do it on your own or you do it in an environment where you have a facilitator or a coach like myself, those results are really going to vary because you have to be in your subconscious mind to get the best results. You have to not be operating from who you think you are. You got to be operating for this more aligned place. Now, even that process, it creates a gap because who we perceive we are and who we actually are two very different things. It's called cognitive dissonance. Now, whenever we do behavioral or personality profiling, that gap's pretty significant because we're answering with our mind, with our perception, our conscious mind, our perception of who we are. Now, with human design, I want you to think about it that we don't have to do it via the mind. We do it through via our birth time. Now, I know that sounds woo-woo, but it's actually science. So the reason why it's science is that we take that reading because that is a moment in time where we have these tiny particles that move through us called neutrinos. Neutrinos are the particles that move through our quantum reality, through our universe. And as they do, they pick up and drop off pieces of information. And those pieces of information come through the planets, the stars, everything that it moves through. So, and again, like neutrinos themselves, there is a huge facility in Japan right now studying these incredible particles because there is so much influence that they're having, even though we can't see them, even though they're just, we have no idea that they're there, but they're really impacting us in big ways. So this is, straight away for me, I was like, oh, hang on a second. There is this science-based thing. We are taking this snapshot of time, the energy that is moving through you when you are born, and how specifically that energy is going to influence you as a human being. Now, human design is a synthesis. It's a synthesis of astrology, Western astrology, as you said, the chakra system, the Kabbalah, tree of life, and also the I Ching. Now, the I Ching is we kind of know it as a divination tool. It's actually a document that the Chinese use to change their life, to transform. They believe there are 64 ways as human beings that we can change. And within these 64 hexagrams in human design, we call them gates, there is a journey. There is a journey through there, and it's all about transformation. It's about the human becoming their highest expression. Now, these 64 hexagrams of the I Ching have also now been mapped back to our human 64 genetic codons. What does that mean? It means that they are influencing this, what we know about behavioral change, what we know about humans transforming. And when I say transforming, what I mean is growth, evolution, from fear to love. This is all in there. The science is in there. We're starting to see how what we once thought was woo-woo, we can now prove with science. And the more that we get into quantum physics, the more we are proving that. We know we live in a multidimensional world now. We know that energy is actually the thing that's creating our reality. We know that there's so much more to planet Earth than what we can see. We know that, the closer we get to feeling, the more we are getting closer to the truth of what's going on. So human design gives us that roadmap. It gives us our energetic blueprint. It's primarily helping us to get out of the head and into the heart, into the body, because this is where the wisdom actually lies. We're conditioned to think that the mind is everything, but the mind isn't everything. It doesn't know anything external of itself. The brain doesn't. Like, the brain is just operating in its own little cocoon, making its decisions from who you were between the ages of 0 to 7. And everything is operating from that place. Whereas we have this entire universe that we have the ability to tap into, this wisdom, this knowledge, this potential that lies within us. And human design really helps us get out of the head and into the body. And it really starts to help us understand that we have this innate decision-making tool, if you like, this method that lies within us. And each of us, it's different for each of us. And we can talk a little bit about yours in a minute. And human design just really helps us to get back to that place where we're going to be more heart-led. We're going to be coming from a place that we are in our greater truth. We're going to experience more flow and less resistance. And really importantly, we're going to heal this thing that people talk about a lot, our conditioning. Our conditioning is who we think we need to be to receive love, to be taken care of, and to belong. Now, it's not true. It's decisions that we made between 0 and 7 that then become mindset. It becomes who we are, our identity as an adult. So human design helps us shake free from that and actually connect into our truth, because the closer we are to our own authenticity, the more we have to give, the better parents we are, the better, the work that we do is more aligned, the more people we can help, the healthier our physical bodies are, so on and so forth. So human design really helps us understand ourselves at the deepest level, gives us the permission to be ourselves, and then helps us to serve the planet from this place of authenticity.
As you were talking, I was like Googling neutrinos. Is that how you say
Love
it?
it.
Because
Yes, neutrinos.
I'm fascinated. I'm also the mother of nerds and a wife to nerds who the idea of multi universe type concept is something that's talked about all the time in the house. So
I love that.
I'm going to put a link in the show notes for everybody to a PBS article where they talk more about what they are, the research that's being done on them. One of the quotes that I, quickly scanned was, as neutrinos pass through and interact us, other things, whatever it might be in the world, they produce charged particles. And the charged particles traveling through, in this particular case, they were measuring it off of ice. They give the ice light and they can actually see the energy that's coming off of it. So it's interesting that, when they look at it in different areas, they can see the energy and it does have a slight mass. They originally thought they didn't. And this is the kind of thing where years ago we did this original podcast on the moon. And I was like, you can't tell me that the moon doesn't have an effect on us. Like, I know that the scientists claim that there's no science for it, but every teacher, every nurse, every person that you talk to can tell you there is a different energy in the universe when the moon is full. And we know that, like, gravitational pull is real. We know that all of these things are real, and we might not understand all these things, but I am interested in being curious about this. And I think that's what real science is. I think real science is saying, I don't yet have all the answers. There are things about the universe that we don't yet understand. And maybe this could be nothing. Maybe it could be something, but I open myself to the possibility, which I think is
Mm.
how I want to live my life.
I love that. Can I just respond to something
Yeah.
quickly as well? I think it's also really important for us to understand that, science isn't perfect. And what we're starting to see now is that science can be so, controlled. It's not necessarily the be all and end all. And we have to learn to be critical of that. I love this example of the moon is that we have to start trusting ourselves. We have to start trusting our experience of life, instead of giving our power away. Now, science is super important and we love it. And I know when people are doing like double blind experiments and all of these things, that's fantastic. But we also need to understand that we live in a world that a lot of science is funded by big business, which means that the science isn't necessarily, focusing on the highest good of all. It's focusing on someone's outcome. So I love that. I love your curiosity. And I just have to geek out on your design because you're a mental projector with the channel of the seeker. So this is your energy. Your consistent energy is all about that. I want the answers. I want to get deep into things. I want to know what's going on. I want to be inspired. I want ideas. I want to explore those ideas. Like your real superpower is exactly what you're talking about. And I love it. There it is in your human
You're like,
design.
I'm seeing it come out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we can talk a little bit about that in a minute. I do want to, while we've addressed like your perspective on this, I was interested to, as I was, searching around and doing research, knowing that we were going a bit woo and that there isn't active science to support a lot of what we're talking about today. I did want to, focus on the interpersonal side, which we've talked about. And I mentioned we did a show with Aliza, who is the astrologist to the stars. She's amazing. So shout out to her. But one of the things that she also brought up, which I thought was just really phenomenal from a perspective and something I hadn't really considered before, is that astrology is something that is very femme centric, that it has a lot of energy that's attracted to like female energy is attracted, whether that is actual, biological female or people who are in tune with that side of themselves in one way or another. And it's from her perspective, another reason why it's so disregarded is because the scientific world is also so heavily male centric. And the mindset around curiosity and being open to things until it can be proven is one that is more about a mindset of rigidity instead of, if we think about like Mother Earth and the femininity around Mother Nature and all of those things and how we define that is feminine energy. And I thought it was really interesting because, she brought up like, well, if you look at women's magazines, they all have astrology predictions. And it's thought of as being this silly thing that women are interested in instead of actually looking into the serious science part of it. And so it's like you said, it's hard because there is not profit in proving that the moon has an effect on us unless someone is going to make a profit, make a product to profit off of because of that. And so it's harder to do those research if someone isn't funding it from a back end. And I don't think that just because something is a scientific experiment that's funded by a corporation, it's a bad thing. It just means that if there isn't someone that's going to make money off of something, nobody wants to fund that study because there's no outcome that they're interested in, like you said. So it doesn't mean I'm not trying to say that there's like a conspiracy against it, but I do think that in general, this is something that's thought of to be like a woman's thing. What's interesting about human design is that it is more rigid in how it is approaching personality test versus, as you said, the subjective nature of self identifying. And I mean, I'm the mom of four teenagers and I see these like self identification responses that they give to the school about like, symptoms of depression and anxiety and all these things. And I'm like, is that really what you think of yourself? And like, I'm living it day in and day out. And I know those things. And so I know when I do an Enneagram or a Myers Briggs or whatever, it's a hard pill to swallow sometimes to be like, yeah, I am inappropriately aggressive sometimes, or I am, these kinds of things that you have to be willing to admit about yourself. And so it's interesting to me that there's this dichotomy with human design where it's bringing that femme energy from celestial bodies and at the same time the rigidity of there is no self-reflection. Like, it's about introspection and learning and thinking about yourself like, okay, I want to hear more about being a projector and what that means, and versus like what I expected my response to be, or these kinds of things. And at the same time, like, what can I learn from that about myself? And how do I choose to let that affect me or not? Or, choose to bring that power into my life in a positive way? Or is it something that, you know, can manifest in a negative way in people's life? I think sometimes when we label things and we, put that energy on it, then it can sometimes be limiting instead of expansive. So I do want to like read the wiki response, but I just said a lot of things. So I'm going to breathe and let you respond to some of that.
Yeah, I love that. There's so much to respond to there. And I want to start with, I want to go kind of back a little bit. And I love what you said about the difference between this being, the feminine energy versus the masculine energy. Now, fundamentally, the reason why anything that is in the spiritual world is a more feminine energy is because there was a decision, there was an agreement. Isaac Newton made an agreement when he realized that when he started to really dive into his research, that he started to realize that there is a whole bunch of things going on that we can't see. Now, every time in the past before Newton, someone had realized this and started to bring the world's attention to the unseen, the church would get involved. And the church would say, that's not cool. God is our thing. And that would become a problem. And it would stop research. It would stop scientists finding things out. So there was an agreement made. And that agreement was that as scientists, they will focus on what is seen, what is in the 3D reality. And the church can focus on everything that is unseen, that is in the spiritual realm. This is where the problem started in the beginning, because we live in a quantum reality. So the unseen is creating the seen. There is no separation. But what happens is that it's also a place where we've yet again separated the masculine from the feminine. We have made the masculine more important and the feminine less important. We all have masculine and feminine within us. Now, the reason why something like astrology, let's say, might fall into a more feminine place is because it's more open to interpretation. Now, the feminine is more about the gaps. It's more about receptivity. It's more about faith and the journey and the weather, the ups and the downs and the emotion. Whereas the masculine, it's focused, it's strategic, it's taking actions towards a goal. We all have both of these within us. Now, how does human design fit into this? Well, human design does have a real air of masculinity about it because it's a structure. It's that structure that we can say, okay, cool. This is the framework of this structure. Now, how do I specifically fit into that? Well, we can do that through a more feminine way. We can be like, okay, well, I'm going to experiment with that. I'm going to see what's true for me. I'm going to try this whole strategy and authority thing. I'm going to try making my decisions the way that I'm designed to make. And that's more feminine because it's more open. It's more receptive. It's not this strategic step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Now, I think one of the challenges with human design is that people have taken it too rigidly. And there are a lot of people that teach human design as a dogma. And I don't believe that's true because it's, being birthed into the world, one of its fundamental principles was that it's an experiment. Like, don't listen to me. I'm going to give you all the information. I'm going to help you with your chart. I'm going to give you the guidance, but you have to run the experiment. Like, you can't just say, well, this is the way I make decisions and just believe it. You have to actually run the experiment for yourself and see if that works for you. If it works for you, fantastic, do it. If it doesn't, then feel free to put it down. Because at the end of the day, something else that you said that I think is really important from a behavioral point of view, one of the reasons I put it down was because I don't want people to attach things to their identity that are unresourceful for them. And a lot of people will just do with astrology or numerology or the chakra system or anything out there, including human design, or in the well-being place. Like, I was diagnosed with dyslexia. What did that mean for me? It meant that I didn't pick up a book until the age of 30. Did it actually help me with my learning? No. Would I do things differently if I could do it over? Yes. And that's my personal opinion because that's my experiment. And I have kids that have faced challenges and I've dealt with them in very different ways. In fact, I've parented My husband and I parent our children in alignment with their design. And we have these two incredible human beings that believe in themselves, that trust themselves, that are being, they're heart driven. They know that they're going to be all right, even though they're teenagers in this world right now, which is an awful time to be a teenager. So I think the thing that I want to sort of come back to is this dogma piece. We have to take responsibility. We can't just learn something and say, well, that's who I am, because you're the only one who knows who you are. You're the only one that gets to say, well, this is my identity. My mission is to empower people, not disempower people. So what does that mean? Well, that means that I want to give everyone the same things that I've gathered over the years that took me from that seat in front of the psychologist when he told me, the expert told me that I would not heal from this. So that's a belief, like that booms. That could have gone straight into my unconscious mind, and then I could have just made that happen for the rest of my life. But gratefully for me in that moment, I knew it wasn't true. So I chose a different belief. And my belief was that I can heal myself. My identity was then of someone who is empowered. So for me, and it's why I've created transformational human design, where I've integrated all of this, it's exactly that. It has to be empowering, because if it's not setting you free, if it's not healing you, helping you heal trauma, helping you parent, helping you serve the planet, helping you feel love, joy, excitement, happiness, then what's the point? I don't want to give you something else that you can torture yourself with, because that's really what's happening in most cases, whether it's a physical, emotional, spiritual diagnosis of whatever kind. I don't want you to torture yourself with it. I want you to use it as something that helps you be a better version of you, and in turn help others do the same.
I love so much of that. And I think it's interesting because I had pulled up the Wikipedia description that sounded pretty scathing when I was reading it, but it's interesting in our conversation, you've already called out a lot of those things and talked about perception and all of that. So I want to read just a little couple snippets of it. Listeners, you can go read more if you want, but I like to have a balanced approach. So I will say it's described as human design as a new age inspired pseudoscientific practice, which there's a lot wrapped up there, described as a holistic self knowledge system. And I just want to call out what I've heard you say is that it's not about knowledge, it's about introspection and growth and transformation, which I think that's where my curiosity is and my interest as someone who's been doing, therapeutic work with trauma kids and, my own family and what we've been through. Like, to me, any tool that I can put in my toolbox to help us, be happier people is something that I'm interested in. And at the same time, I do wholeheartedly understand and agree that, again, picking back up where Wikipedia says, its effectiveness has not been confirmed by peer reviewed research. And I don't think any of us are claiming that. Again, I heard you say there's this information that's out there. People are researching it. We don't have studies to back it up yet. Yet we are looking into these things and trying to show how the energy of the universe is affecting us all. And I think that's a big picture question for me. It's not just human design, it's not just astrology. There is energy in the universe. What does that mean for me, for my family, for our earth, for us as a people, and all that kind of stuff? So then it goes on to say a lot of what you've already said, which is that human design purports to be a self knowledge method, which does not have any specific religious dogma or affiliation. It names the different things that you mentioned that is incorporated with it. And despite all of that, has been described by a theologian as a trans religious project that is breathtaking in scope and synthesizes 7 or more traditions. It has also been described as a psychological counseling instrument and a comprehensive and personalized map of your unique energy and life blueprint, guiding you towards self awareness, personal growth, and empowerment. So, all that behind us, I mean, we spent most of the show now like getting to the place where hopefully, listeners, you have your own openness to kind of going into this mindset. And now I'm ready. Emma, just hit me with the what does it mean? What does it actually mean? Highly individualized system of ancient and modern sciences, if that's how we're going to describe it. Why does it use astrology? Like you talked about the matter and the energy, but what is it telling us? What are we getting from that then we're able to interpret? Like, what is my body graph?
So I love that. This is a massive, big, open question. And it's probably the one that people struggle with the most, because What happens with human design is when people get a reading or they start to dive into their chart, they're like, oh my God, this is so true. This feels like a permission to be me. But what do I do with it? And this is actually the question that I think is the most important. Well, what do I do with it? So ultimately, it's all about understanding the truth of who you are. One of the things, because of the nature of my work, one of the things that I see all day, every day is people trying to change. I see people wanting to transform their life. Now, in so many cases, people are trying to change things about themselves that actually they don't need to change. They're not meant to be changing. It's that their conditioning is telling them they have to be a different way. Maybe they need to be thinner. Maybe they need to be smarter. Maybe they need to have more money. Maybe they need to, have a better relationship. But they're asking themselves the wrong questions. So with human design, it helps us understand, okay, well, where am I truthfully coming from? So let's take you, for example. You're a mental projector. What does that tell me straight away? Well, that tells me that the way you move through life is you are hugely empathetic. You are taking in, amplifying, and reflecting back the energy of everyone around you. So what that's telling me straight away is that it's having a massive impact on you. Now, is that impact being a positive impact, or is that being I love to use the words resourceful or unresourceful. Is it resourceful, meaning that it's moving you forward, it's supporting you, it's sustainable, or is it unresourceful, where it's coming from fear, it's unsustainable, and in some way it's holding you back or keeping you stuck? So straight away, it's important for you to understand that as a projector, you need to know that other people's energy is constantly affecting you. It's making you tired. It's making you feel emotion that potentially isn't even your emotion. Yet you've probably, spent years trying to heal this thing in you, but actually it's a pattern that you've created in your brain because of an emotional experience you had as a child, taking in other people's emotion, amplifying it and reflecting it back. So starting to understand, like, hang on a second, is this even me? Is this even my energy? Is this even my emotion? Because a person like you, if you're sitting here in your office, you're recording a podcast, you're doing the things, you feel a certain way. You might feel grounded. You might feel curious. You might feel, whatever you feel. And then you go out into the kitchen where the family is, and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, what just hit me? Like, there's all this emotion. I feel this pressure to get stuff done. Oh my goodness, like all of a sudden I have this pain in my knee. Like, what's going on? So it's understanding that actually as you move through life, if you get on a bus, if you're at the supermarket, wherever you are, you're taking in all of this energy. And the first thing for you to understand and start to question, is it even mine? Is this energy even mine? Because as human beings, we're meaning-making machines. So this energy, if you think it's yours, you're going to make it mean something, and that meaning is going to get attributed to your identity. So we want to start, for you specifically, just to start to be like, okay, this might not even be my energy. So making sure that you're body scanning all the time, like really just feeling into those sensitive energies that are going on within you. Now, on the upside, on the flip side, when you're interviewing someone, when you're in someone else's aura, you can feel their emotion. You can feel their drive. You can feel their intuition. You can feel, what's going on in their body. So it helps you ask better questions. It helps you, read what is not being said or is not being done. So all of a sudden you understand that you have this access, so much more access to wisdom and knowledge. You probably find that even in our conversation, you'll be like, oh, you've already covered all of these things, when you said before. But really, you've felt all of this energy and you're just responding to the energy that you're feeling in your body, So what that means to you is that now, as a mental projector, it's really important that the way you're designed to make decisions is really getting in tune with that energy, with that feeling, and then having the ability to talk it out. Because a mental projector, your consistent energy, the energy that you take into a room and you influence others, is your mental energy. So your mental energy is going to, you're going to put ideas into people's heads. My eldest son, he has a mental definition as well. And we'll sit at the dinner table and he has this great game where he'll think about something and then he just waits for one of the three of us to bring it up. You have that much influence. So when we start to understand what's going on inside of us, how we're influencing others and how others are influencing us, then we're starting to make better decisions. And we start to make decisions from a place of feeling. not a place from analysis. And again, we're conditioned to make decisions from analysis, but actually our greater wisdom sits below our neck. And then the analysis or the thinking or the research or all of these other pieces that can come in later to support or deny those things. So how can it help us? We start with type. Like I've just started with you with projector, we start with type, and we've got 5 types. We've got the manifester, we've got the generator, the manifesting generator, which is a hybrid of the two, the projector, and the reflector. Now, the overarching themes is if you're a manifester, you're here to inspire people into action. So you're a person who's driven by creativity. You can also be a person that when you know what you want and where you're going, you can be a force of nature. And that's okay. You're going to feel like sometimes you fit in and sometimes you don't. And it's really important that where you fit in, these are the people you're inspiring into action. So you pay attention to that. You have to not people please. You have to not put yourself in a box to fit in. Then with generators are the largest group. Okay. So we have the smaller group, so the manifestors, the projectors, and the reflectors. But the generators and manifesting generators are 70% of the global population. So they're here to be inspired into action. We're the builders. We're the people who listen to your podcast and we're like, oh my God, I love that. So now I'm going to go and learn about it and I'm going to grow it. I'm going to build it. It's going to be the work that I do in the world. These are the people that want to take their inspiration and make it the work that they do in the world. Then we have manifesting generators, which are a combination of the two. So they tend to be a little bit subhuman. And one of the things that really set me free, because I'm a manifesting generator, is that we're a non-linear being. So that means we're going to jump around a little bit. We're going to do a bunch of different things. And the reason why we do that is because we're taking a piece from everything, and then over time, we'll put all of those things together. So example is all my behavioral background, whether that's NLP, whether that's profiling, personality profiling. Then I bring human design and I put it all together. That's what a manifesting generator does. Then we have projectors, and projectors are our guides. These are our wise sages. I often refer to you guys as Yoda. You need to sit on that cushion and believe in your value, and you've got to see and recognize yourself, because you're here to be seen and recognized for the wisdom that lies within you, and then guide people. It's the new way of leadership. The manifestors have been almost like that old school, and any type can lead. Like, don't get me wrong, any type can lead, but the manifestor is almost like the king, queen, that old kind of what we would have perceived in the past as a leader. The projector is more of a, sits in the corner office and gives the wisdom, like the thing that's going to make the difference type guidance. Very wise people. But they have to be conscious that they don't have a lot of energy. You have to learn to know your energy well. You're not designed to work in a 9-to-5 job. You're not designed to be hustling. You're not designed to be all the balls in the air at once. You have to have downtime. You have to have time for yourself to regenerate. And that's the same for manifestors and reflectors. And then our reflectors are 1% of the global population. They are here as the ability these humans have to read energy is off the charts. Whether that's as a GP, being able to read the energy of what's going on in someone's physical body, let's say, to anything in the more spiritual realm, to being so intuitive in relationships. And they're always reflecting back what's going on. So they're our ultimate mirror. It helps us all grow. We'll see the truth of what's going on and then helps us grow. So once we understand our type, we also start to understand that we need to operate a little bit more differently in the world. And this is what we call strategy. And I'll go really quickly through this piece for you. As manifestors, we have to inform. Okay, our strategy is to initiate and inform. So when you have a creative idea, or if you want to go and start something, do something, build something, you got to go and do it. You got to trust that flow, that energy, go and do it. You have to tell people, you have to declare the direction of your intention. So it might be something like, I'm just ducking out to get milk. It could be something as simple as that. Or dinner will be in 10 minutes. Like if you have manifested children, you want to make sure that you're always informing. It's not asking for permission. It's just declaring the direction of the intention of your energy. Now, with generators and manifesting generators also need to inform, but their strategy for the generator is to respond. So when you're a sacral being, it's all about showing up in the world and being out there. So there's things to constantly respond to. I mean, I'm responding to you. I'm a manifesting generator. You're asking me questions. the things that every time you speak, it's like ping, ping. I feel these things in my body that I'm like, oh, I want to respond to that. I want to respond to that. I want to respond to that. You could be responding to a job opportunity. You could be responding to your child. You could be responding to, you see food and think, oh, I'm actually hungry. It's being in response. Instead of creating things in the mind, it's about being in response. So you might be inspired by something. And then for a generator, it's really going to show up in your external reality for you to respond to and say, yep, I've got energy for that, or I don't have energy for that. Then with projectors, it's all about this piece. It's called waiting for the invitation. And it's probably the strategy that is the toughest because people are like, what do you mean? I have to sit around on a couch and do nothing? And a lot of old school human design people will be like, yeah, basically. And I fundamentally disagree with that because the whole point of being a projector is that you guys love to obsess about something. There's something that you just freaking love to obsess about. And then you want to make it into a system or then you want to share it with the world. And it's really about knowing what you're good at, what you're passionate about, what you're obsessing about. And when you focus on that and you share that with friends, family, whoever's around with no desire to force that on them or that they have to pick it up or they have to do this with it, then all of a sudden you become very magnetic and invitations for your wisdom and your knowledge will come, very easily. And then with reflectors, it's all about time. It's giving them time to make decisions, to decide where to go, what to do, what actions to take, just slowing everything down for them. Now, when we start to operate with our strategy, it means that we're showing up in the world in a different way. And I do recommend that you experiment with it. If you need more information, then go for it. You can find it on my podcast. There's plenty there. But just experiment, like what does an invitation mean to me? Or for me, what does responding mean? Like one of the big lessons I learned very early on was I got an insight, as I often do in the shower, and it just said, you need to change the name of your podcast to the Human Design Podcast. Now I'm like really early in my human design experiment. I'm like, okay, cool. So that's internal. I'm not going to act on it. I wrote it down in my journal. And then I was like, okay, well, what have I got to lose? I'm just going to wait and see if something turns up in my external reality. At the same time, my ego is like, you can't do that. You don't know enough. Who are you? All my imposter syndrome, all my fear. But I'm like dedicated to the experiment. So I'm just running the experiment. Then the next day, a mentor says to me just out of the blue, he said, someone needs to do a really good human design podcast because there's not a good one out there. Boom. There's my strategy. There it is, playing out in front of me. My gut's like, yes, I've got energy for that. I changed the name of my podcast and then everything flows from there. So this is how we can start using our human design. And the next step is authority. And I won't go through them all because I'm conscious of time, but this is then the way that we can make better decisions. And when we use these 2 things, like don't even have to dive into all the complicated stuff, which we can, and inevitably you want to over time. For just these 2 things, your strategy or 3 things, type, strategy, and authority, experiment with that. And you're going to start to see how things really shift fast in your life, like more alignment.
I am not at all disturbed that you were able to nail me without knowing me because I am curious. I mean, part of that I think is also admittedly like when I get a tarot card reading, I'm like, you're able to pick up my energy, what I'm interested in, and those kinds of things, but also knowing that I am a deep empath and that I am someone who would be described as an old soul who people come to me for advice, like that I'm that type of person. I mean, maybe because I have a podcast, you would have assumed that, but I mean about like personal things and stuff like that. That my husband is going to listen to this and be like, well, she nailed you. And we're like, yeah, she did. Which is, it's interesting to also know, like, okay, well, if I don't fully believe something, can I also believe that you just nailed me? Like, what does that mean curiosity wise? And makes me curious to learn more about the body graph because, as you said, there's 64 hexagrams. There's like all these kinds of things that I think can guide us or help us see things about ourselves. And one of the things I learned during the pandemic, during quarantine, when I had no downtime because I was a work at home mom running my own business. I have 4 teenagers who are all in virtual school and I never got to recharge. And it was like, oh, I didn't realize that I had built that into my life. And I think that there are things that, can come up when you're doing a reading like this that can truly help you realize what you need in your life. Whether that's, there were some things that you said where I was like, I don't know, but maybe in a little bit or whatever. But there are also some things where I'm like, yes, 100%. I literally just got back from a weekend away. I did what I call hotel mommy, where I go away for a couple of nights and I just recharge so that I can be my best self for everybody at home. And I think that there's a lot of wisdom in learning those kinds of things about yourself. So before we move on, I want to remind people that they can go to your website, emmadunwoody.com, and get their chart. So
Yeah.
we'll put a link in the show notes for everybody. If you're curious, I mean, what's the harm? Check it out. And also has, as she said, a podcast and is on social media where you can learn more. One of the things that I try to always do is help listeners walk away with some sort of like actionable stuff. And originally, when we were emailing about scheduling a podcast, one of the things that was talked about in that was this idea of burnout, that a lot of people are feeling burnout these days. I think the emotional toll of the last few years is something that I don't think we as a society will truly understand until 20 years from now when we're reflecting back on it. And so I would like to ask for you to kind of give perception and tips on specifically how someone might incorporate things that they've learned or have access to with human design to address if they're feeling that overwhelm or that burnout in their life.
I love this question. And burnout's been a really big topic because human design helped me understand that we have two types of burnout. We have burnout that we all talk about, that we know, that's in the mainstream media. Through the frame of human design, this is the burnout that manifestors, projectors, and reflectors are going to know really well. And that is you push yourself too far, the body gives up. So you end up being flat out on your back in some capacity. Then we also have this thing called functional burnout. So 70% of the global population are a generator type. They're what we call a sacral being. And we do this thing called functional burnout. And what that means is that we still turn up. We still go to work. We still parent our children. We still do all the things. But our energy is done. We've literally lost the lust for life. We don't have any passion left. We're no longer connected to our physical body. We are living Groundhog Day. And this, I would say there are so many more people burnt out, but they're doing functional burnout because the generator types won't necessarily be flat on their back. Their bodies don't give up on them in the same way. It's more, like niggles or long-term things or dis-ease or unwellness that is manageable or whatever it is. And they just keep going. So the first thing to understand is that if you are especially a manifestor, a projector, or a reflector, you are picking up, amplifying, and reflecting back other people's energy all the time. And especially it's this sacral that plays a big part because that is life force energy. It's a very powerful motor in the body. And when you're subject to other people's sacral energy, and as these non-sacral beings, you're surrounded by them all the time. Statistically, they're 70% of the population. So it's always there. It's always running through your system. So you need to take time out. You need to be in your own aura. Again, the aura is now a proven science. We know we all have this ball of energy that surrounds us that we call our aura, somewhere between sort of 6 and 12 feet around us. And as soon as you're in aura with someone else, you are taking in their energy. So the first thing to understand is you need time out. You need to empty out your aura. You need to be alone. And you need to be able to do the things that feel relaxing for you. Again, not saying if you have a belief that you have to do, if you have to meditate or you have to go for a run or a walk, that's not relaxing. That's a belief system. So it's about taking time out, doing things that fill your heart up, that help you feel truly relaxed, like your mummy away weekends and that sort of thing, like perfect. The second thing that I think is super important is this lesson. First, this realization that no matter your type, anywhere in the human design chart, we have centers in the chart and they're either going to be colored in or they're going to be open. They're going to be white. And wherever they're white, we're taking in other people's energy. So although I'm a manifesting generator, I have very little definition. So I take in a lot of other people's energy. So the next thing that I think is so important is that you need to start to get clear on what is actually yours. What is your energy? How do we do that? Simple, body scan. We get back into our physical body. We actually we build the muscle of paying attention to the subtle energies that we're always experiencing. Now, a lot of people will say, like, I don't know what I'm feeling. I don't feel anything. How do I know if I'm in my body? Right now I'm sitting here with my legs crossed and I can feel one leg crossed over the other. That's it. I can feel myself. I can feel my body. I can feel the energy around me. If I sit here for just a moment, like I can feel your energy. I can feel like something very specific about you, and it's a projected thing, is I can feel your attention. I can feel that you're paying deep attention to what I'm saying. I can feel I've got a plant sitting here. I've got a couple around me. I can feel the energy of that plant. We can all do this. Again, it's quantum physics. It's a provable science. So we just have to get used to actually paying attention to the subtle energies. Now, I would recommend everybody on the daily, you are in your own aura at some point and you're body scanning. So you're just closing your eyes and you're just bringing your awareness, your attention from the top of the head slowly down through the body and just feeling. That's it. Not narrating, not I feel this or I feel that, or why don't I feel this, or oh, I've got a sore elbow. I better do something about that, or oh, I'm thinking I should stop thinking. Nope. Just feel. Just let whatever be and feel those subtle energies. And then the next step is to get really honest with yourself. Like if you feel tired, what are you going to do about it? If you feel like you're overworking, what are you going to do about it? If you're a generator type and you feel like you're living Groundhog Day and you're like, nothing lights me up, you need to rest. You need to take time out. You need to play. And one of the things that I teach a lot, and because it does go against our conditioning, especially you guys in the States, like, you are so heavily conditioned to work hard. And the truth is the human brain and the human body doesn't respond to working hard well. It responds to play. It learns better from play. It heals from play. Everything that you want to access, you're going to access more of the good stuff from play. So in that downtime, it's like finding ways that you can play, that you can lighten up, that you can, is it playing a board game with your kids? Or is it going to play a game of, some sort of sport? Or is playfulness for you going to the movie with girlfriends? But it's play. We have to learn to take time out to play. I had a client say to me just this week, she's like, well, I took my workload. I realized that I was working too hard. I took my workload down to 80%. And I said to her, so what did you do with the extra 20%? And she just looked at me and she was like, oh my God, I just filled it up with other stuff that I had to do. I'm like, exactly. So you have to fill the extra 20% up with play, with lightness, with rest, with all of these sort of things, because this is where you're going to transform from, grow from, create an amazing reality from, parent better from, get healthier from. It's the rest, it's the play, it's the space. So when it comes to human design and burnout, it really helps us understand that we have to learn to get to know our energy and how other people's energy affects us and do something about it. Take responsibility for it. You might have an amazing friend that you adore, but every time you catch up with her, you're exhausted. And you see her every day because she wants to see you every day. You're like, oh, okay, I love her, but I'm going to see her just once a week. We have to take responsibility for those things. Or the overworking piece, we have to take responsibility. Our ego, our mind, our conditioning will tell us there's nothing I can do about it. I have to work this hard. I have to do this. And that's just not true. That's BS. There are always solutions. But as long as our mind thinks we can't, then we can't. We have to ask ourselves better questions. How can I find a solution to this?
I love that you talk so much about things that are also practical and backed up by science, like boundaries, like with the friend. And for me, play is like literally being giddy with my kids, making jokes, dancing with them in the kitchen and choosing to watch television that is joyful and jubilant and like makes me laugh versus shows that are really stressful. Like I have to be careful with that. And I laughed. Listeners can hear it because I was muted. But when you were talking about in your body graph, when you have a white space, you're taking up energy. So I want to give perspective for listeners on what my body graph looks like because I've talked on the show countless times about being deeply empathetic and how difficult that is for me in terms of helping people but not taking on their energy. That is something that I've been learning to do. And there are 9 areas on the body graph. 7 of mine are white. Like that is when you were like, when it's white, you're taking other people's energy. I'm like, yeah, that sounds about right. And one of
Yeah.
the things that I think is really helpful, regardless of who someone is, because as you said, we're all taking in energy from other people around us. And you could show up to work in a great mood, and the person who's your cue bait is like, you know, storm cloud over their head, and suddenly like you're drained because their negativity is rubbing off on you. And there's 2 things that have been really helpful in my life to integrate to help with some of the stuff. And the first thing is just to start practicing and asking the people in my life to practice before they verbally and emotionally dump, to say, hey, are you in a place where I can talk about something that's bothering me? Or, find whatever the words are for you. But that's something that's been really helpful for my teenagers as well, because their friends will often give them the, oh, woe is my life, or, oh, this gossip piece over here. And they're not really wanting to hear that stuff sometimes. And so by practicing them asking before they do it, their friends learn to ask before they dump. And that's been huge for me because sometimes, like just last night, I said, I'm not really in a space where I can have this deep conversation. I understand that, like, you're feeling a need for support. How about I just give you a hug and we just like sit together for a minute? And that served the purpose of what both of us could handle and need. But that communication is so key. And the other thing that I found to be incredibly helpful for my own processing is to physically think of that energy. It's something that I read in Lisa D'Amour's book, but she talks about the energy that teenagers have, and they'll like emotionally dump on you. And then you're standing there like holding all of their stuff, and they skip off and they're like, oh, I feel so much better now because I just got everything off my chest. And you're standing there holding all of their stuff. And you're like, I am overwhelmed. I cannot hold this big boulder by myself. And in her book, she's a psychologist, she gives permission to just like set it down. She's like, that's not your stuff. You're holding the stuff and it's not your stuff. And it's okay to know that like that stuff exists there and you can come back and visit it with them if you need to. But most likely, if they gave it to you, they're done with it and you don't need to hold on to it either. And so, yes, she was speaking about teenagers, but I found that this really applies to everyone in my life, the people that I work with, the friends that I have, all this kind of stuff. Oftentimes, we just want someone to listen. And so, if you're asking someone, are you in a place where you can listen? And then they say yes. And then you take that and you're like, I hear you. I see you. And now I'm going to put your stuff down. Like that was hugely powerful for me. And I know that I'm this, small group of projectors, but I think that a lot of us, parents especially, those people experiencing burnout, the energy of the people around you, like if you walk into office and the cloud over his head guy is there, maybe before you walk into the office, you tell yourself, Greg is going to have a cloud over his head today, and that cloud is not mine. I do not
Yeah.
need to be under that cloud with him.
I love this. This is so, so powerful. And it's so important, both of these points. Now, the first thing I just want to respond to is we are allowed to have boundaries around supporting people. And as women, we're conditioned the opposite. We're conditioned to be wide open, which is why we take on other people's energy because we think it's our responsibility. We think it's our responsibility to fix everything and to be everyone's hero. And it's just not true. I actually have a part of my design, a line 5 in my profile where, and many coaches do, like I am the problem solver. It's like I have a beacon and I walk around life and everyone who has any problem, which is basically every human, they're like, you can solve my problem. Help me. And I didn't think that I could say no. I didn't think that I could do that. Whereas when I started training and I built my business, I was like, wow, No, I get to enter into a contract. Like once people pay me money, then I'll help them. Obviously, with my girlfriends, with my family, I help them. But I have to create these boundaries because if I don't, then everything is taken from me. And that's how it feels. It's taken from me. I'm powerless. I'm in my victim state. So we do get permission. And human design really gives us that like, okay, well, hang on a second. Now I have my energy. I need to take care of my energy. I need to get to know my energy. And I love what you said about your teenager and the dumping the information because this is absolutely true and it happens all the time. But I want you to imagine that, with human design and with these neutrinos, I want you to imagine that it's just moving through you. Because if we see energy differently, if we change our belief, and our beliefs are nothing more than a convenient assumption. It's not a truth. It might be our truth, but it's not true. It's a convenient assumption. If we change that to think, okay, well, energy is always moving through me because it is, again, scientifically proven, and there's nothing I have to do about it. Now, sometimes I'll do something about it. Sometimes I'll pick it up. Sometimes I'll problem solve. Sometimes I'll whatever. And other times I'm just here. I'm just here to let it move through me, to have an experience, maybe to learn something, to hold space, but I have to let it keep moving. And this is what's really important, especially with non-sacral beings like yourself, is to let it keep moving. Because then when you feel everyone else's stuff, it doesn't feel so overwhelming and confronting and uncomfortable because you already have this presupposition that you don't have to do anything about it. You just have to let it keep moving, just keep moving through you. And, if there's something to be done, then you'll know at the time. Like you said, you already know your boundaries. You know when you're there, when you can receive it. And it's the same when you're in an environment, a work environment. The reason why you can get so heavily affected by those around you is because we're wide open, and we have to choose not to be, we want to be heart open, but we also want to have beautiful, clean, energetic boundaries. So what does that mean? That means that I might set an intention for the day to say, okay, I'm going to really focus on my work today. I'm also going to focus on being my greatest potential today. And we consciously choose where we're going to put our focus, where we're going to put our energy, because then we actually get the RAS, the reticular activating system in our brain focused on what we do want, as opposed to leaving it wide open to Barry in the next cubicle having a bad day with his wife and you then having to be involved in that because your reticular activating system is like, well, I need to take care of that. I need to, put that fire out. And you really don't. So it's all about taking responsibility for our energy. Whether we believe in it or not, we need to give our brain evidence. That's how our brain changes. It needs evidence. So start feeling energy. Start noticing when you set energetic boundaries, when you set intentions, when you do these body scans. You have to record the results that you're getting. Write it down in your journal. Do gratitude on it each day. And you're going to wire it into your brain. And you're going to get to this place where, one of the things for me energetically, and I'm also hugely intuitive, hugely empathic, didn't believe in any of it. I've spent so many years trying to reconnect my intuition. We have to take responsibility for this energy and understand that we matter. Our energy matters. And we're not just here for people to take, but the only person that has the power to change that is us. So really getting to know your energy, how it operates, putting boundaries in place, letting energy move through you instead of holding on to it. All of these things are going to really change, your vitality, your experience of life. It's going to put you back in the driver's seat.
Thank you for circling back around to things that we can do. And you're not alone in that shower space as being a great one to scan, and you're alone. And I think some of your old energy is being washed away and you're starting fresh. I think the shower is a sacred place. My
Yeah.
sacred is defined a little bit different than yours, but it is a place that if listeners, if you're not finding time for that self care, I would suggest that being your starting point to take an actual step is to give yourself space to have that time. So I want to remind you, listeners, thank you for tuning in today. If you want to find more of Emma, you can go to emmadunwoody.com and on Instagram at the_human_design_coach. And like I said, we'll put a link in the show notes, but you can also get your chart on Emma's website. And you do coaching and different kinds of things with people, but they can get their chart for free on your website if they're curious and want to see and learn more. So all of those resources, as well as articles that I referenced, the previous podcast with Eliza on neutrinos on pbs.org, all of that kind of stuff, we'll put a list of resources in the show notes for you at realeverything.com. And you can head to patreon.com/the whole view to get all of our shows delivered to your inbox ad free, which is also a really great way to support the show that we create and produce ourselves. And seriously, if you enjoyed the show, can you please leave a review saying so? It costs you nothing except just 30 seconds of your time and makes a huge difference in my being able to continue to do this. And don't forget to follow or subscribe in whatever podcast app you're using. Emma, I want to thank you so much for giving your time today and your willingness to just talk all things human design and be open to a little bit of, poking and criticism. You're a good sport and I appreciate it. And listeners, I appreciate your willingness to be open to grow through your own personal changes because no one is perfect, but in listening, learning, and unlearning, we can choose to become better versions of ourselves for ourselves. So I'll be back again next week.